Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Welcome to another very beautiful and wonderful podcast on Wali Wonders. We're here at Sofis Productions in Lahore, and we have Aneela Shahzad, who is a regular on this podcast. Welcome, Aneela Shahzad. Assalamu alaikum.
वालेकुम अस्सलाम.
It's so good to have you again. And आज हम काफ़ी diverse topics discuss करेंगे क्योंकि आजकल बहुत breaking news चल रही हैं टीवी के ऊपर और from all over the world, from USA to Europe to Russia to China, there's a lot of things that are happening. And for the first topic, we want to discuss Xi Jinping's visit to Saudi Arabia. Recently, Xi Jinping traveled to Saudi Arabia, and for the first time, it seems, after the post World War II era, that China and Saudi Arabia are setting the price of oil in another currency other than the USA, which might seem like a small thing, but if you ask people from the subcontinent, especially from the Asian countries, we have been in this system which has not helped us. The Western economy is such that America and Europe have exported their inflation towards the Asian countries. And America sets the price of oil, America sets the price of dollar. So for the first time in a long time, Saudi Arabia is setting the price of oil in yuan. So this is the fall of American hegemony, some might say, and this is like a very good news for some of the countries, but a very bad news for the rest of the world. So let's talk about this visit with Aneela Shahzad. And what do you think the future implications of this very wholesome deal would be?
Well, yes. Xi Jinping's surprise, it was like a surprise because we were not expecting that Xi is going to just come to Saudi Arabia like this, and especially because of the Ukraine war. Things were already so tense between all the global players, and it was like there was also a lockdown going on in China, which seemed like was making the picture as if China wanted to slow down or something, and it didn't want to come into the global player thing, and it was like acting a little passive for the last few months. But this visit shows that they were really planning a lot of things in all this time, and it was really something like a very unprecedented thing that Xi asked the King Salman and the Crown Prince to start paying dealing in the yuan for their for exchange of their oil. And China is the one of the biggest oil importers, and if this thing happens, and because they have been trying, Russia and China, they've been trying for a lot of years that there should be an alternative currency basket, because these people, all these countries that have been stuck by US sanctions and European sanctions, are really up to the neck with the system you were talking about. And they were looking for this place that how to make the yuan part of the currency basket, or make the Russian ruble the part of currency basket. And they found this chance over here in Saudi Arabia, because Saudi Arabia has been, since the end of the Second World War, the very close, very faithful ally of the US, and there was no chance the Saudis would break this. There some people have been saying that it's a marriage between Saudi Arabia and the US, and there was an article in the Foreign Policy magazine that said that this monogamous marriage, the Catholic marriage, is now coming to an end, in which there can be only one wife. And now the Saudis are saying that no, we are going to keep 4 wives. We're going to look for more wives. And now they have actually made a second marriage with China. And this is really unprecedented. The Z and MBS, they've also talked about the CPEC, the China-Pakistan economic corridor, and they've said, both of them have said that they are really, really interested in making this thing happen. And MBS says that he wants to invest heavily in this. And so this is, for Pakistan especially, it's really, really a special time, because it was at the brink of default. There were news going on that Pakistan is like going to go into a default or something like that, but this news is going to bring Pakistan back, and for this reason, and for the whole region actually, not just for Pakistan. It's going to be a total regional and a global game changer, this thing, if it really goes on just like that, because MBS, Saudi Arabia, which is one of the richest country of the world, and China again, which is another richest country of the world, if they are both saying that we want to invest and expand the BRI, Belt and Road Initiative, and the CPEC initiative, and Z wants to invest inside Saudi Arabia to make that 2030 vision that MBS had, to fulfill that vision. It's really, really going to be a game changer for the whole region. Yeah.
Actually, what I think is that this is not just a very simple tale. It's a very big story. And it starts like 30, 40 years ago. This story started, in which basically what Saudi Arabia is to the world. Saudi Arabia and the USA had a very unholy alliance, in which the USA has been fighting Saudi Arabia's wars, and Saudi Arabia has been fighting or giving deep information to the USA on its wars. For example, we saw what happened to Iraq. We saw what happened to Iran. We saw what happened to Libya. And we saw what happened to Venezuela. And recently, when we see Russia, the current situation that is going on, Europeans, recently I read this article in which Europeans were saying that America has heavily profited from the Ukrainian and Russian war. And Europeans are being hit by this crisis a lot, because Europeans were dependent on Russian oil and gas. And now that gas has been sold to China and India on a very economical or a less cost. So, first of all, if you have oil in a lower price, you can obviously outcompete your competitors. A little while ago, I also heard this news that if Germany would subsidize its oil prices or gas prices, all the goods that Germany would make would be cheaper than the rest of the Europe. So German goods would be flooded on all the European markets. Same thing is happening, that Europe is getting oil and gas at a very high price versus what India and what China are getting. And sadly, Pakistan is paying the most price out of all. So what the story actually started in two camps. There was this Egyptian camp, which was Jamal Abdel Nasser, and then there was the Saudi Arabian camp, which was King Faisal. So at first, all the Muslim nations were united with the Nasser, because Nasser was a pan-African and he believed in Muslim unity. He believed that all the Muslim nations should come together, and whether it's any problem, any financial problem, or any enemy, we could defeat that very easily because there's a large number of Muslim populated countries and Muslims in the whole world. So when Nasser attacked Israel. This is, I think, 1971, and they fought very furiously. The first battle in 1947 that Muslims had with the Israelis, Muslims were not just defeated, but they were humiliated because the Israeli army completely wiped a lot of Muslim nations out. And in the 1971 war, what happened was that Muslims gave a very big blow to Israel, but it was on the lines that Nasser was told that he shouldn't be the first one to attack Israel, and he would win the war because he had this oil, these embargoes, and he took over the Suez Canal. So they were saying that Nasser would win the war without firing any bomb. And what the Israelis did is that they surprised attack Nasser, and they destroyed all his air bases, and the planes that Russians were sending them took a lot of time to come to Egypt, of course, and that's the cause that they lost the war. But it was a really close battle. The books of history could be rewritten if Nasser would have one or two lucky wins in that war. So after this scenario, what happened was Nasser, some say he fell in a depression because he lost such a big war. But others say that Nasser was given some poison, or Nasser was killed drastically, suddenly. Somehow he was walking fine, he was living fine, but one day we found out that Nasser died at a young age. And then came the camp of King Faisal. King Faisal did the oil embargo of the 1970s, in which the inflation of the USA was more than what the inflation of the USA is today. And there were huge lines all over USA around the petrol pumps because no one could get petrol. And USA was in a really dire situation. But what happened next would amaze you. That King Faisal's own nephew, or one of his relatives, close relatives, came back after he was studying in an American university, and he shot him at blank distance. So this story is like really interesting. The turns that this story takes is really interesting. From then, there was this alliance between the Saudis and the Americans. And this alliance was this petrodollar alliance, in which USA would protect Saudi Arabia's oil wells, and in return, Saudi Arabia would let USA set the price of oil in dollars. And this was a game changer for the whole world politics. Now, there were some other characters involved in this as well, which I want to take names. One of them was Adnan Khashoggi, Jamal Khashoggi's uncle. Then there was Dodi Al Fayed, which was with Diana, his father. And this was a group of very influential Arab businessmen and leaders who got together, and they were not that morally strong, but they had all the money in the world. What we hear is that they were hanging out with Hollywood stars, and they were doing all these extravagant things, and they had every possible thing in the world. And they thought that USA is a better solution. The Western hegemony is a better solution than all the Muslims getting together. So this unholy alliance for the last 30 years has made a lot of wars. A lot of Muslim countries have fallen. From there onwards, we see what happens to Iran and how the Shah of Iran gets out. And 30 years, Iran is in a complete Muslim. We want to discuss on this in a bit as well. And then we see what happens to Saddam Hussein, which was an enemy of Saudi Arabia. Then we see when Gaddafi wants to set the price of oil in gold or in some Egyptian currency, what happens to Gaddafi? And this was such an unholy alliance, and the Saudis and the USA were so proud of this, and they took such a big advantage over all of the world that there's no words to describe it. And now that when we see that gas prices and oil prices are so high, and now we realize that this unholy alliance is ending, there's new superpowers that are emerging. Russia is turning the tides of war in Ukraine. China is becoming this mega global economic powerhouse. And now, finally, the stars have aligned for the Muslim countries to really set the price of their goods in what they think is the best price. So there was a very long story, but I would like to also listen from Aneela Shahzad about all the scenario that has happened, and please give us a little brief.
Yes. Yes, this is a very deep history that you have just told us, and very interesting also. But I would like to jump over into a slightly more recent history than that, because this is about the Arab Spring. And this is a story that starts from Afghanistan. It starts from 9/11. Which was, many people are now saying that it was an orchestrated event, 9/11, that happened in the US, and immediately after which the US attacked Afghanistan, and after that, 2 years after that, it attacked and occupied Iraq. And a couple of years after that, the Arab Spring broke out, starting from Tunisia and spreading into Libya, spreading into Yemen, spreading into Syria, and Iraq was already there. So this is something like, just right now you said that the Saudis have been allying and funding and aiding the US in all its wars, and in all these places where the US and NATO forces first entered in Libya, and then they entered in Syria, and like I'm saying, they were already there in Iraq and Afghanistan. So in this whole, I'm going to take your words, unholy alliance, what was happening was that the Saudis were hand in gloves with the US, because the Saudis really thought from the deep of their heart that their alliance with the US is going to keep them at the top of the world. But what happened was that the Saudis, from the first day, they dreaded one country, and they considered one country as their sore enemy, and that was Iran. And the Saudi, what I've read and what I've understood is that the Saudis had asked or were wanting the US to break the revolutionary force that was emerging out of Iran. The Iranians were making allies in Syria with Bashar al-Assad. They had allies in Yemen in the form of the Houthis, the Houthi government. They were also Shia, and wherever all around in the Arab world, wherever there was Shia elements, the Iranians were making alliances with them, and they were strengthening this like a belt all around the Saudis. And the Saudis thought that if we ally with US and with these wars that they are playing, then perhaps the only thing that they wanted from the US in return was that Bashar al-Assad should be removed, because Bashar al-Assad was that a pivot upon which Iranians were depending for a regional construct. But what the Trump administration did, they came into Syria, they spent all that money, they took aid from all the Arab countries, but they withdrew. The moment Russia entered the war, the moment Turkey entered the war, they brought in their 300 S-300 missile systems and their warplanes and whatever. Trump said that we are going to withdraw because of this. The Saudis got this first thing, what do you call that, push or a blow, that their dependence on on the US was like a facade. I mean, they could not trust the US anymore. And from that moment on, this thing has slowly and has changed the foreign policy, changed the outlook of the Saudis in these certain number of years. And that is the result of that thing, is that today we see that they have welcomed Xi Jinping, and they have agreed on buying oil. It's going to be Russian oil actually, in yuans. So this is, they are going to buy the Saudi oil in Chinese yuans. So yes, your story and this story is really important to understand. And another thing that you just mentioned was that Russia is still being able to sell its oil via, it's being able to sell its oil to China, and it's being able to sell its oil to India. Because, a few days back, what happened was that President Modi said that we don't care about US sanctions, we don't care, we're not afraid of US and all that, and what we are going to do, because we need oil, our economy is getting hurt, we are going to buy the Russian oil at a lower cost. But what has been coming out in the news in recent days is that the Indians have just bought the Russian oil to export it again, all of it, back into Europe and back into these old buyers that Russia was already giving to. So this is a double thing that we need to understand. One thing here is that India has made this show off of being a very strong anti-US thing, but in the depth, it was actually aligning with the US policy of buying Russian oil and giving it back to these people, the EU and other Western buyers. And the second thing that comes out of the same thing is that the EU and NATO and the US, who have been putting so many sanctions on Russia, and they have been standing and with Zelensky and supporting him and inviting him in all their parties and having him in all their TV shows and whatever. But in reality, they are still buying the Russian oil through alternate routes, alternate ways, by bypassing their legalities and all that. So this is the game going on in the Russia-Ukraine war background also, and we need to talk about that also in more detail.
But first I would like to say is MBS now having a good heart? Is that why he was doing all this? Or was Saudi Arabia also being cornered by the USA? Because when we heard about the Jamal Khashoggi murder, MBS was tortured literally for a few years on that situation. So, before that, I would like to talk about what really happened to Mohammed bin Salman. Is he having a change of heart? Is there something, God's divine power, that is helping him escape all this? So we also need to understand that America was cornering Mohammed bin Salman for a long while. First, we heard about Jamal Abdul Khashoggi's murder. He was brutally murdered in a Turkish embassy, and that really has stuck to Mohammed bin Salman's legacy. And they really tried very hard to get MBS out of his seat, out of his kingship, but they failed. Then we also hear who was responsible for the 9/11 attacks. Why there was no Afghani that was involved in the 9/11 attacks. There was no Pakistani that was involved in the 9/11 attacks. But these two countries paid a very big, hefty amount of human sacrifice, of financial sacrifice, and the time that was destroyed for both these countries. And all this blame was really set out for Saudi Arabia themselves, because there were some Saudi nationals involved. So the Democratic Party has been saying again and again that they will reveal who the true perpetrators of the 9/11 attack were, and they have this clear signal towards Saudi Arabia. And then the third thing is that Biden or Trump or the European nations suddenly, through this green revolution that was a pretentious revolution, that suddenly, especially that little girl Greta Thunberg, who has won a Nobel Peace Prize, and she says, "How dare you? How dare you?" to all of these big intellectual people. So what they thought was they could shift to green energy in a day, and Europe or the USA does not have the infrastructure to support green energy. And the second thing is that green energy is not reliable. The sun is shining, the sun is not shining at some times. Wind is blowing, wind is not blowing at some times. So when wind is not blowing, sun is not shining, where would Europe get its energy from? And but still, through this great drama that the whole maybe this drama came from the World Economic Forum, and the personality we know as Klaus Schwab, who is really mentoring all these big leaders of the world. And they had this philosophy that the world would suddenly go green, and the Saudi dependence is not of any benefit to the US or the NATO or the European allies. And oil is very dirty. We don't need oil. Oil will destroy our whole world. But the real point is that all the world is running on fossil fuels. Now, when the war even happened between the Ukrainian and Russian side, all of the European nations were like, we're going to shift towards green energy, and we don't care about the oil that comes from Russia. We don't care about the gas. Of course, the real intellectual leaders did not say, but all these fake media drama people were like, this is our time. We should switch to green energy. But all this was a big fugazi. And now MBS wants the Europeans and the Americans to really suffer. He's telling them to drive their Teslas, to drive their electric cars, and not to take energy from him. So this was really MBS also being backed up to a corner. And we should remember that he is only 37 years old. He's a very young leader and he's making very bold moves. The future of Saudi Arabia is not certain in any way because Saudi Arabia and its Neom city and all its oil money is not the future. We know that fossil fuels is not the future. We know that the cities that he's creating, the Lion City, which is 170-kilometer long, and in which you could get to anywhere in 15 minutes, and you'll have all the things that you need at a 5 minutes walk. This could be true. This could be the city of the future. But we have to see whether people would really want to go to Saudi Arabia. I mean, if I was building a Neom city in Pakistan, would all the investors from the world come to Pakistan? Yes, Saudi Arabia has a lot of money, but at the end of the day, they are a Muslim nation. And Saudis have been very pampered and they have been spoiled with so much oil money that they do not really invest in their own human development, and they really give money and they hire talent from all the rest of the world. But also another thing, that Saudi Arabia used to be a very strict nation, and now suddenly this Mohammed bin Salman character is allowing celebrities from the United States of America to visit some events in Saudi Arabia. He's inviting big comedians. He's inviting DJs, and he wants the people to be open about a lot of things. So is Saudi Arabia also on a big gamble? We also remember that when oil was not invented 60, 70 years ago, all these oil nations were barefoot. There was no cities over there. There were only camels and little villages.
So now there's something I want to add over here is that MBS has had all these issues that you just mentioned, but there is also another thing that globally, the European and the US economies are declining. And that has been a fact, and people from the West, economists from the West, have been forecasting this for quite some time now, that the next century is going to be an Asian century. And we have seen in Europe one nation defaulting after another, and the series has been going on. Greece has defaulted, Italy, I think Spain, a lot of countries have been defaulting. And the reason is that they have not been able to compete with the economies of Asia. Because Asia is not just only China, it is also Japan, it is also Taiwan and Hong Kong and Singapore and all these small countries that have really developed high technology, high tech, and they are they have been unbeatable in so many industries. So it is true that the next century has been forecasted as the Asian century, but the US and the EU, they have been trying everything to stop that from happening, and that is why they have had all these wars in the Middle East. That is why they are pumping wall everywhere. Wars everywhere. Biden was so happy when Russia was going to attack Ukraine, and he was saying every other day there would have been a statement from him that Putin is going to attack in 10 days, Putin is going to attack in 1 week or so. And then Pelosi, she went all the way into flew into Taiwan because she wanted another war to be pumped up over there. So what they've been trying to do, and so coming back to MBS and Saudi Arabia, they also had realized, I think, that the Asian century is coming, and we are although all our interests are like set with the Europeans and the US, but we have to break those ties now, and we have to reset our businesses, our economy, our things with these Asian new emerging powers. And another thing which I always say is that globalization era has ended, regionalism has come to the fore, and the biggest regional power of the regional bloc of the world is going to be Russia and China, and if it happens, the Central Asian countries and Pakistan and Iran and Afghanistan. This is going to be one big global region that will be undefeatable. I mean, it's going to be so big. But we don't know if it's really going to happen like that. But in any case, China, Russia, and some of their allies, they are still in a very strong position. And I think MBS and the Saudis realized this, that they were just being stubborn in not letting go US when the US could do nothing for them. So that's what's happened, I think.
And people, when all of this young generation looks at these leaders, especially Biden and Jerome Powell, who's trying to go Volckerish. He's the chairman of the Federal Reserve Bank, and Janet Yellen. They now, for the first time, people see that these people are not in their right mind. Maybe Biden might be going through elderly abuse because he's waving hands in the crowds, and he's not really coherent about a lot of things. But other than that,
you need to tell us about his son's story, and
yes,
Elon
we
Musk
want to
also.
come to Hunter Biden's story as well. But what I want to talk about is when you talk about Joe Biden and what he strives for, it's older. It's an era that has gone by, and they're stuck in that era, really. And for example, there was this guy Volcker who was the head of the Federal Reserve Bank, and in the 1970s, as I told earlier, when Saudi Arabia banned the oil, they did this big oil embargo on the United States, and they had inflation on 12%, 13%, 14%. At that time, Volcker increased the interest rates of the United States, and he increased it to like 12 or 13% to really fight the inflation. But at that time, the debt to GDP ratio of the United States was 30%. Now you're saying that you're going to follow the same policies that Volcker was following, and this is 2022, and they have been kicking the ball for a long while, kicking the can maybe for a long while. That might be the right idiom or something. And the debt to GDP ratio is 120% or 125% to be exact.
Right now.
Yes, and now they want to be Volckerish, and they're looking on this amazing economist who saved the United States of America in the 70s. But that cannot happen. That is not the reality. And also, I want to talk about the media as well at this point, because at like 20 or 30 years ago, all these big broadcast channels like the BBC, the big newspapers like the Times Magazine or the Herald, or all these big publishers, they used to really be focused on speaking the truth. And their careers would end if they would report something that was vaguely false, or they wouldn't have checked their sources correctly and something came out, their careers would end, the companies would fall. But now people in this media, in this day and age, they can say a lot of lies if they're aligning with the larger picture that the global elites want to tell you. And their careers don't matter. Their careers do matter, but they don't get fired. They don't get penalized. They're not very anxious about their stories. They. So this era, in which you have all these big people who have billions of dollars and they're very big investors, and they sit in these big broadcast news channels, and they have all these other big celebrities, and they have created this environment in which they keep on telling the same lie again and again. And what really happens when you keep on repeating a lie is people start believing in it. And it's been such a long while that this lie has continued, that finally now the Europeans and the Americans themselves are waking up to the real reality of the world, which is not the same. So next, I would want to discuss about the Hunter Biden story as well, which is like the biggest. It could be a conspiracy, not according to Elon Musk, but it could be the biggest scandal that the United States government has faced, that any president has faced. It's bigger than the Iran contraband. It's bigger than the Nixon. It's bigger than the JFK. What happened is that Joe Biden, the Democratic Party, had a secret channel, and they were discussing things that were supposed to be banned, that was not supposed to be said, and these emails were being sent to high executives in the Twitter company, and the Twitter people were also complying with all these high value, high level Democrat leaders. So, what we have found now, there's this journalist called Matt Taibbi as well. He initially he started this investigation, and Twitter has been censoring the Hunter Biden laptop story since the elections. So this is really a very big blow to the freedom of expression, on the freedom of liberty, those basic morals that the United States of America was built upon. And how sad is it that Elon Musk started getting death threats after exposing Joe Biden and the Democratic Party and the Hunter Biden laptop, which, if Hunter Biden was a crack addict, a drug addict, or he was a womanizer, that would be something that Hunter Biden himself is responsible for. That does not affect a lot of other people. But what we are hearing from the Hunter Biden laptop story is that Hunter Biden had these big deals going on in Ukraine, and especially in their energy sector, which is oil and gas. And they had billions of dollars of deals in which Hunter Biden was taking a cut. And there were messages from Hunter Biden's laptop and his phone that take 10% out for the big guy. And who was the big guy? His father. So Joe Biden was directly benefiting from Ukraine. And Trump also tried to reveal all this, and Trump was sadly impeached twice, and he was disgraced and humiliated on this a lot. But this is the sad reality that the president of United States, it has such a big scandal. I mean, we used to imagine that Trump had such a big scandal. They are peanuts when we see this Hunter Biden, Joe Biden, and how corrupt these people are. So, without further ado, I would like to also get some good points on this Hunter Biden laptop scenario and the freedom of expression, the freedom of liberty. And do you think that Elon Musk is like on the right track and he's going to really uh, make- and he's going to really make a change in the society?
Well, it's very depressing to hear all this, that the US portrays itself as the biggest democracy of the world, and it comes to do wars with so many countries just on the slogan of humanitarian reasons and all that. So, but in reality, what are those people? How? Because I've always been writing against the US, by the way, because I always think that these people who have the most power, most powerful weapons, most powerful economies, they are doing bad things with all the humanity. And yes, this is definitely a very big scandal of Joe Biden and Hunter Biden. But I want to go further back to tell you that since the day the US has become the sole superpower after the Second World War, they have been doing bad things with countries all over the world, and also especially with their very close neighbors in Central America, all the little states that are in this Caribbean belt. And in each and every one of those countries, they set their own puppet governments, and they enslaved those people economy wise, culturally wise, and like they did not let those people come out of their poverties and miseries and like backwardness, because the US, when they came out of the Second World War, they made this Washington consensus that whatever is in this Western Hemisphere belongs to comes under U.S. hegemony. So not only did they do this with these Central Asian small states, but they also did the same way in South America. In each and every one of these countries, they were puppet regimes installed, and with the help of those puppet regimes, they literally plundered the resources and the wealth of the whole of South America. These are the things that make the US economy run. Matlab, it's not like they are so like intellectual, or they may be, but the real blood that runs their economy is the blood of other people. And what happened in Peru last week is another example of because since Hugo Chavez some 25 years ago, the South American countries have started this movement called the Pink Tide, and they have tried to oust or kick out U.S. interest from all of the South America. So Hugo was able to make alliance with Brazil, Lula, and with Argentina, with Bolivia and Venezuela, and all of these countries came together to throw out U.S. interests from South America, and the U.S. has been trying to topple each one of these governments, each one of these leftist, pro-Soviet, you can say, pro-socialist, you can say, governments. One by one, they have been against Maduro in Venezuela. They have been against Lula and Delma in Brazil all this time. But these people have still survived. Maduro is still there. Lula has been re-elected, I think, just a few weeks ago. And Morales, who was kicked out from Bolivia, he has returned. His party has returned in the next election. And in this Peru was one of the country that was in the rightist wing. in the right wing all these decades and years. But this was the first. Pedro Castillo was the first leftist type of person who came to power in Peru, and he has been there for just 1 year, and there have been continuous allegations of fraud and all these different problems have been created for him, and he has spent this whole year in difficulties. And this now in the end, they were threatening him of impeachment, and he tried to break the assemblies, but they didn't let that happen, and he was impeached, and he has been held, and he's in the prison right now. And this Dina Bollard, who was the vice president, has come into power, and she has also been a right-leaning person, because the day they came into power, the day she was made vice president, she started saying that I am not ideologically aligned with Castillo's ideologies, and I'm not with him, and she has aligned with the rightist people, these oligarchs. That Maduro also said in a statement, I think 2 days ago, that there's this oligarch that is controlling Peru, and they have not allowed Castillo to continue his tenure. So that's what happened. And it's really interesting. It's really worth studying. We should always be open. Our eyes should be open about what is happening in South America.
Very interesting. And I also want to discuss about the mentality of most of the human civilization. Most of us were colonies of Europeans or the Americans before the Second World War, and we were humiliated so much, especially the rajas and the queens and all the big guys of the subcontinent, which subcontinent had 20 or 30% of the world's GDP. The goods used to be made over here, and there was a lot going on. There were spices, there was land, there was beauty, there was everything over here. And what happened to this whole nation, especially Pakistan and India, and you're talking about the countries that are South American countries. Yes, all these countries have been in this slavery mindset. They have been in this slavery mindset that has been killing us, killing us slowly and slowly for the past 75 years. You can never progress. We have been controlled for a long while, for 200 years, and since the World War ended nearly 75 years ago, we have been in this constant mindset of slavery, of being humiliated, of considering ourselves someone less than the other people that are progressing or that are over the world. And this mindset has really, really had a very drastic and a very negative impact on a very big population. Pakistan is like the fifth biggest population in the world. And how could you say that the fifth biggest population of the world does not have a lot of intellectual people who can make a lot of things, who can build industries, who can build IT? It's not like that. It's our own vision that is based upon slavery. And I just want to briefly touch on this very big story from the 1970s and the 1980s. In the 1970s, and before I tell you the story, and another thing I want to say is that when you look at all the big top 10 industrialists of Pakistan, you see that most of them own their own banks. That's how rich these people are. The owner of HBL, the owner of UBL, the owner of all these other big banks are themselves the richest people of Pakistan. And the story continues in the 1970s and the 1980s, in which we have this amazing character, a Pakistani, Ahmed Raza Abidi, who made this huge influential bank called the BCCI. I don't remember the exact meaning of the word, but it was later named as the Bank of Crooks and Criminals Incorporated. And the story that we hear in Pakistan about the BCCI bank is that it was a very big and a very progressive bank, and it grew to such a size that it was in one of the biggest banks of Pakistan. And it took over the First Bank of America. And Ahmed Raza Abdi was very close to Nixon. Ahmed Raza Abdi was very close to Adnan Khashoggi, who is the uncle of Jamal Abdul Khashoggi. And what these people did in the 70s and in the 80s, you see the slave mentality in the first place, that they used to get underage girls from Pakistan, and they used to serve those underage girls to the Saudis and the royal family from Dubai and all these big Arab countries. The king of Saudi Arabia, his personal doctor's son was Adnan Khashoggi, and Adnan Khashoggi made this worldwide network of he consolidated all the mafias. The mafias used to fight with each other. And Adnan Khashoggi was such a great or such a bad evil genius that he actually was the first one to get all these mafias together. Richest man in the 1980s, he had the biggest yacht. That yacht was sold to Donald Trump, then to some other guy. And he used to have these extravagant parties. And what they used to do is they used to blackmail other people by videotaping them, by doing some shady deals with them. And Adnan Khashoggi was also a massive weapon dealer all around the world. So the story that I'm coming towards is that these people were truly in the slave mentality, having everything in the world, and for them to spend how much ever money they want. Now these people were spending millions of dollars per day, and they had so much money that they used to sit with the royal families of the British royal family or the other royal families. And what happened was that, not believing in their own countries, having everything but not believing in their own selves, and believing in the Muslim culture, in believing that all this glitz and glamour and hedonism is really a black hole, and what our religion says, and what our modesty and what our the whole mentality of Islam and the whole mentality of the subcontinent, and what a big nation, a great nation we were. All that went towards nothing. And what happened to all these guys at the end? Ahmed Raza Abdi was broke, and they closed his bank, and he came back to Pakistan. Then there was this Adnan Khashoggi, who was also broke, and he did not even have the ticket of an economy plane to get back to his homeland. And then what happened to this great Mossad leader, Robert Maxwell? Robert Maxwell was killed by rogue Mossad agents. He was killed by his own people, just because the rich, the really successful people of all these small countries don't believe in their own people. They just want to make a lot of money and go hang around with some celebrities, and they believe that hedonism will get them superpowers or something, when whatever they did, they destroyed their own legacies. They could do a lot of things in the whole world. They could really change the image of Muslims. They could really give prosperity to our countries. But sadly, this slave mentality that we can never be better than Pakistanis can never be more richer than the Saudis because they have more oil. So we have to provide a young woman from Pakistan to them, and then Saudis thinking that we can never be as great as the Europeans or the Americans. So we have to do all the dirty things. We have to make all the banks. We have to do all the shady weapon deals, and we are somehow inferior than all these big nations and big people. That's the slave mentality. And what really are, since Imran Khan has been ousted, our leaders also been saying that you have to really break this mental barrier. The Europeans and the Americans also have the same hands, the same brain, the same two eyes. They think in the same way. But what happens when you have such a massive brain drain in all the Asian countries? Whoever wants to do anything wants to go outside of Pakistan. Whoever wants, these Asian people have followed a dream that is a lie for a very long time. The Europeans and the really rich global elites would invite all these people into their countries, let them build all the infrastructure, but they'll keep all the money to themselves. While all these people, these Asians that are going to all these big nations and building Europe, building the United States, could somehow, if they only had this mental barrier that was broken, could really do all these things over here in their own countries and really be free and really go on to achieving something.
I would
So, continuing
like
with
to.
all these things, I would like to also listen to Aneela for some in-depth
I
analysis on all
think
these things.
I think this has been deliberate. Like the slave mentality that we see in our all these countries that have actually fought with their blood and with their youths, and matlab, for decades they have fought for these freedoms, and they got their freedoms after the Second World War. Everybody started getting their freedoms, but the mentality remained the same. How was that? What happened? Because when a nation stands up for their independence, for their freedom, there is so much vigor, so much like blood, and so much like energy in that movement, that it is really like odd to think that they would take that freedom, get kick those colonials out of their countries, but yet they would like to be their slaves. What happened? The thing that happened is neo-colonialism. I mean, that is a reality that so many people just want to like shun away, like it's a false narrative or something, because the West says that it's a false narrative. The Western media does not even use this word because they think this is something false. But the reality is that from each of these countries that the European colonialists were getting out of, in each of these, they created, before going out, they created this elite. They created this, civil society, they call it. And this civil society was composed of the higher rankers of the military, the high rankers of the judiciary, the high rankers of the political system, and they made their ties and made their web of control in such a way that if there was one person in a country who would stand for true freedom, they would have that person assassinated, literally assassinated. And they would, if that person would be a military person, they would have him assassinated and then put the political person, their own puppet, on in power. If that would have been a political person, they would have him assassinated and then put a military general in power. And this story has been repeatedly going on in all these countries. The problem is that we don't, the average person does not go through all that history. We don't have time because everybody is struggling for their own ends to meet. Everyday life is so difficult for everyone. So people don't have the time to, like, I am sitting in Pakistan. I know something about my country, but I don't know what happened in Indonesia. I don't know what happened in Malaysia. I don't know what happened in Libya or Algeria or in all those countries, so many countries. So with this, mental divide, you can say, we've always talk about divide and rule. This is the mental divide, that you deal with every country separately, and inside each country you deal with the military ties separately, you deal with the judiciary ties separately, and then you have so many puppets in the country, and you have strings, and you can pull one string at a time and pull another string at another time. So because of all this, these puppet regimes that are put in place, they are expected to, and they are forced to not allow true development and true progress happen in their own countries. And this is the reason why those of us, those inside of our countries who think that they can do something, they have this urge to just get out of the country. And especially the elite class, especially the rich people who can afford to send their children abroad, who can afford to have them settled there, they will send their children to the best schools of the country, and then those children will be fed this dream that better you have to go to the UK or you have to go to the US to take your higher degree, and then definitely you're going to settle there because they are going to pay you better. So this is a cycle that has been going on, and it's a big, huge economic cycle. And it's really going to be difficult to break that mental slavery, to break that barrier that you were just talking about. And to nationhood has also been by so many, liberal, there's also a liberal class in all these countries, which is also supported by Western elements. And these people, they would never allow, they would also try to kill that national patriotism, you call it, that love for your religion, that love for your country. They think that those are, they say that these are old-fashioned conservative ideas and we should get out of them. And in our colleges and school, and even in our media, we see that there is lesser and lesser talk about the love of your country. It's almost vanishing. There is lesser and lesser talk about the love of your God, your Allah, your Prophet, your religious people, the love for Quran, which is the true last book from God. I mean, such a big miracle that everybody has in their homes, but nobody has the time to open it up and just read through. It's just a book. You do have the time to read through one book, and if that book is actually from God, how can you just not put everything in it? So this is you're saying this mental slavery is being blustered or strengthened from so many angles.
So many angles. when we hear about the accident of Princess Diana and Dodi Al Fayed, we hear that Princess Diana was pregnant with Dodi Al Fayed's son or daughter, whatever, whichever it might be, and Prince Philip and Prince Harry. Dodi Al Fayed's father says that Prince Philip and Prince Harry are Nazis because they think that having a Muslim child from the royal bloodline of the queens and the kings was like such an unholy thing that they would kill their own daughter or their own sister or their own princess, one
Mother.
of the greater princesses, because they even the British people don't respect all the monarchy, and they respect a few of them, in which Princess Diana was a highly respected woman, and she had a lot of charisma. They killed one of their own and Dodi Al Fayed because they couldn't stand a prince or a princess having a child that was a Muslim. So imagine the insult that they feel, these Westerners or these global elites feel, even by the name of Islam or Muslim. And then you want to go and build their stuff, and you want to go and take their dollars and their euros. And what's the story with me, Jafar, and me, Sadiq, the older story of the subcontinent, that even if one of the bigger leaders suddenly decides that he doesn't want to follow this humiliation, or he feels like he can do more in this scenario and he does not have to follow, then there are these snakes and these rats amongst our own population. Like we recently saw, I don't want to take names, but when Imran Khan was ousted, of course the Americans wanted Imran Khan out because he was with Russia when Russia announced the Ukraine war. Imran Khan was with Putin, but they couldn't kick Imran Khan out by themselves. They needed some people in Pakistan. So when we think that it's more than God Almighty, it's the Americans, they would bomb us to Stone Age, or they would put us in economic sanctions, and beggars can't be choosers, and all this mentality makes you go 100 years in the past. We can never progress if you don't break this ideology. Someone has to die, someone has to make a sacrifice. We have to all stand together with him. So when Dodi Al Fayed's father, he's a very big billionaire. So even when his son was killed, so and he went after the royal monarchy, he actually left. He sold everything from the Britain, and he left Britain and went to someplace else, because and at the time you won't hear anyone talking about Dodi Al Fayed. We don't even know his name now. And most of Dodi Al Fayed's own life, he had so much money, but his life was without purpose. And then he found Diana, and then he found a purpose in his life, and then he was killed. And when he was killed, none of the Muslim population came after, said anything about Dodi Al Fayed. They were all crying on Diana, Diana, Diana. So this is the kind of slavery that we need to break. This is the kind of me, Jafar, and me, Sadiq, the snakes and the serpents that have destroyed us from within.
The thing is that, from the time when I was young and in school and college, we used to have a lot of literature from our great poets, and especially Iqbal. Allama Iqbal was such a big inspiration. And when I used to read Allama Iqbal's poetry in my youth, I used to feel that it is something not less than a revelation. and because it's so inspiring, and it heightens your spirit, and it moves you into that energetic phase where you want to and he talks about khudi, khudi, the exact thing that you're talking about right now, that the ego, the human ego, the self-respect. He talks about self-respect so much that he says that about that bird कि उस रिस्क से मौत अच्छी जिस रिस्क से आती हो परवाज़ में कोताही. So this is the type of things that we used to read, and all the youngsters used to read at that time. But now the IMF, when they give you these debts and all these, they impose these structural, they're called structural conditions, that you have to change your syllabus. You have to change your things in your Urdu book. You have to change your things in your Islamiyat book. They told Pakistan to cut off the jihad chapters from the Islamiyat books. Now, if our child is not going to know what jihad is, and even in the Arab world, it started, this narrative started building that jihad is actually only the jihad inside yourself. अपने नफ्स के साथ jihad करो. Just fight if inside yourself, and just make yourself pure, and do all those good things on a personal level, that is. But the real Islamic jihad that was preached and practically shown by the Prophet was not only the jihad of the nafs, it was also jihad of the battlefield. And the Muslims were, I think, the most courageous fighters of all times, and the way they conquered, the way they did, all those stories were miraculous, the way they conquered all of the Arab world, or all of the North African belt, and all up to Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, even going further. So what is the reason why IMF or the World Bank would ask our countries to take out the jihad chapter? Because they don't want the youth to be energized with this idea. They don't want any patriotism, to the love of their country that has been smashed away from their thought process. And it is so sad. And I believe, and there's no apology in this, that the real jihad is the jihad of the battlefield. And the proof of that is that the US and their allies are making wars every year, everywhere in the world, and they have their big naval warship carriers, aircraft carriers all over the oceans, and they have their ballistic missiles, and they have their armies, and they are doing relentlessly, ceaselessly, making one war after another. And our people, our youth, is being preached that jihad is nothing, jihad is only yourself. So what will happen? We will not have stronger armies. We will not have energetic people in our armies. So this is exactly what you were saying, that what has happened to the culture. So this neo-colonial thought process has not ended. Their control and their string pulling has not stopped, and they are doing it with so many multiple layered. This is the real hybrid war that is going on, and we don't even see it. We don't even, you were mentioning Imran Khan, and Imran Khan has been saying in his speeches lately that who has the real power? He's been asking this question. Who has the real power? Kiske paas hai asal taqat? So that is the question everybody needs to ask. कि आप वोट देते रहोगे 200 साल तक, lekin you will never get a leader who is really going to be representative of your inspirations, of your ideologies, because in the end Nawaz Sharif will be a puppet of maybe the UK, and Zardari will be a puppet of maybe the US, and the other will be the puppet of another, and these are the only choices you will be having. So how will there be change? How will there be? How will we get all those values and those morals that you're talking about? How will we get them back when this whole structure is still there and it's working and it's strong?
That's very right. I do agree on all these things, and it's a very grave thing that we most of the battles that we have to fight are in our own heads. And I do believe that Islam also said that jihad is of the nafs as well.
It is, but that's not the only jihad.
There's another jihad as well. So coming to, if you really think about having a war, then China is preparing more nuclear weapons for so when it invades Taiwan, and Taiwan is US could attack China, and US has a lot of nuclear weapons. Could you give us some detail on that, and also give us some detail on the Iranian protests that have been going on?
Yes, China, is not a war-going type of country, and it has resisted from attacking Taiwan for such a long time, because Taiwan, I've said this before also, that Taiwanese people have all their business going on with China. Chinese businesses are taking advantage of Taiwan, and Taiwanese business are taking advantage of China. So they are, the people are like in a symbiosis type of relation. But when the US it instigates Taiwan political spectrum every now and then, and it instigates them on giving statements against China, and saying that they are free, and saying that they are going to never join China. And then the things like Pelosi comes over there in China, in Taiwan. Those are all ways that the US is trying to drag or pull in China into a China-Taiwan war. Because if China attacks Taiwan, it can occupy it in one day maybe. Although it's got enough of technology and weapons for doing that. But what will happen is that the day they enter Taiwan, the US and all their allies are going to come flying in to have this battle. And you know what happens? I've said this before also, that the idea of a regional power is that a regional power needs to be secure in its own neighborhood. A power who is thinking that somebody can come and attack me the other day is not going to be considered a regional power. I mean, it is a vulnerable power. It's not a hegemonic, controlling. A regional power is going to be one that has influence in its whole region, in its whole neighborhood at least. And what the US wants is, just like it was happy with the Ukraine war, because it wanted Russia to be pulled into this situation of war, in which it would have to make this long, protracted type of thing, which it could not get out of, because they've done this in Afghanistan, they've done this in Syria and Libya, and they have learned this thing that nobody can win a war actually. So they know that if Russia starts this war with Ukraine, and the whole NATO mechanism is going to start working, and Putin is going to get stuck. So the same way they want China to like do something bad with Taiwan, so the whole NATO mechanism gets there, and China gets stuck in a long, protracted war that it won't be able to win. But China is like intelligent enough, or I think calm enough, that it is like not going into that. It's not falling for that trap. It's just like staying calm, and it gives us signals, it gives some hard talk, but it does not really ever try to occupy. And the same thing about the Russia-Ukraine war is that it is going to be, because Russia was very powerful, it had a lot of weapons, but weapons have a limit. I mean, how much do you have? Already you're hearing that it's buying drones from Iran, it's going to buy ballistic missiles from Iran already now. So that means their stockpile of weapons and usables are getting thinner and thinner, and they don't want to exhaust the whole thing, and they know that they have to stay there for a long time, so that's why they're doing this. And the same thing is with the EU also, because these people who have been in peace for so many decades after, since they have been colonials, and since after the Second World War, they have been in peace because they collaborated with each other, they made NATO and all that. So they don't have those stockpiles of weapons, usables. So their weapon stocks are also depleting. Now that's the exact thing that you just said, that Europe is suffering, US is benefiting, because US has all those industries that are making those weapons and all that, and they can sell to all these countries in Europe who need them. But the European themselves, Germany, France, Britain, they don't have big stockpiles of weaponaries, and their stockpiles are also thinning. They are scared now, not only of the gas, not only for this winters, but also of this fact that they don't want to spend all their already depleting economic thing on weapons. And that is the reason why Macron has said last week, I think, he has said that we should prepare for giving security guarantees to Russia when it agrees to end the war. I mean, everybody was abusing Macron for saying such a stupid thing, but he was he can see the situation of his country, he can see the situation of his continent, and even Germany has sent a message to Putin that you come to the negotiation table as quickly as possible, because these are some people who have started thinking about them. And I think Biden has given a signal to Zelensky last week also that you start some negotiation thing also. So there is an idea put forward by some people that it is going to be still a protracted war, because neither will Putin accept his losing the war. Putin is going to stay in Donbas and Luhansk and in Odessa, and neither will Zelensky say that he has lost the war and he is going to stay in his part of Ukraine, and it is going to be there's going to be a ceasefire line in between them, and practically the Ukraine is going to be divided into two parts, one allied with Russia and one allied with the European Union, and they're going to both say that we have won. Like this, the only way EU and Putin both are going to say we've won, and it's a practical thing. I think this might happen. So that's the thing. And the other thing about the China-US war, that is something like we should all dread, because US is that type of fanatic, and that type of every problem for every problem they have this hammer. But Obama used to say, Like the only solution for every problem in their head is war. So that's what they do, and that's what they're good at, and that's what they are going to drag the whole humanity. So they're making more and more powerful firepower, more and more swift type of technologies, and more satellite aided technologies, and they are preparing actually for the Armageddon. They are preparing for the big massive war. The generals, Austin Lloyd and the other Milley, they have been saying this thing that the next war is going to be a big one. We have to prepare for the big one. What does that mean? That means that if China doesn't start a war in Taiwan, the US is going to come and start a war with them. And if that happens, you know what's going to happen? The whole world is going to get destroyed. Everybody is going to get involved, and it's going to be a end of humanity as we know it.
As far as we can see, even the Aztecs and the Mayans and the Egyptians were involved with someone else. And when we usually see the fall and rise of civilizations, when civilizations are falling, when one civilization is falling and another one is rising, there is usually a massive war in which the losing side gives away their global dominance and the other side is the victor. So, what I think is that although this has been the history, but when we're talking about a war between China and USA, that could be potentially very dangerous for the world.
Nuclear.
Because of the nuclear threat and everything. And we don't know what is the Armageddon.
We don't want that war to happen. Actually, we don't want Russia and China and Russia to be and US to be in war, because we are looking forward to a progressive Asian century. So we want Asia to be peaceful. After such a long time, we want there to be no war. And if there has to be a war, the war should be brought to the US, to their continent. And not to Asia anymore. This is, I think, this should be the red line of big policy makers of our Asian countries, that no more war in this continent. You want war? Okay, let's fight it in Europe. Let's fight it in North America. Another thing you just asked was about the Iranian protests. They've been going on for almost 1.5 years now, and there's an estimate that at least 150 people have died in these protests. And the protest for these protests is going on in so many other countries also, in Europe, and Iranian diaspora in the US. They have been making protests, and everybody is being for this feminist, you call it hijab, anti-hijab protest. And what the Iranians side is saying, what the Khamenei government narrative is that these protests are not indigenous. They are not being organized by the people of some people of Iran, but rather they are color. They're one of the type of color revolutions. And you know what color revolutions are? All those revolutions that are not indigenous, and people from another country, another place are making the narrative, making the all the material, or all the aid and fund and everything that's required, and buying people from that society to and organizing them on the social media platforms and all those, so that people of a country stand against their own governments, to topple their governments. And all these color revolutions, by the way, have taken place in those countries which are anti-US, which are against the US camp, or in the Soviet camp maybe. So the Khamenei government is saying that this is a color revolution, and the US and their allies have been backing these. And another thing, there are so many parties, political parties from Iran that are operating in exile. And if you open the Wikipedia for this thing, you will find that there are in dozens such parties that are in exile in the UK, in the US, in Germany, in Sweden, in France. And this one particular party, the MEK, whose head is Mariam Rajavi, I think her name is. She has been very vocal about this in the last few weeks or so, and she has been saying that it is time has come to topple this Khamenei extremist, fundamentalist religious dictatorship, and it is time for the Iranians to be free. So this, what would you think of a party that is in exile in France, for example, or in UK, for example, and they say that there's a protest going on in Pakistan, and they would say that it's the right time to topple this government. We would say that that is a foreign interference. And that is exactly what the Iranians are saying. And it's been such a long, huge effort that has been going on for 1.5 years just to topple that government. So that's an example of all the nasty things that the US and their allies are always doing with other people. They are trying to topple governments. They did this in Sri Lanka a few months back. They did this with us in Pakistan. And they do it with every other country. So even if somebody is against Iran, we should be sympathetic
towards Iran. But why are we hearing that Iran, the regime of Iran is cracking down very hard against the protesters? And then there was this news that 15,000 protesters were to be executed.
No, that was just a propaganda news.
And
but they have been. I just told you that 150 people have almost been killed
by the regime.
Maybe in different reasons. There's firing also in protest, and the Iranian government has been saying that these Western people, they have sent these shooters in the protest areas, and those shooters have killed the protesters.
That's what happened in Libya as well.
Yes.
There was this protest in which someone killed, opened fire, and then the whole thing went out in a fire. I follow this podcaster, Valuetainment is his channel. Everyone knows about Valuetainment, and his father helped the Shah of Iran escape from Iran, and then he was in the USA for a long while, and he started a channel called Valuetainment, and what he was saying is that Iran was a very beautiful place. Iran was a place of progress. Iran was a place where all these huge celebrities and all these people used to visit, and Iran was a very modern and sophisticated Muslim nation. But this was planned by some people, and they threw out the Shah of Iran, and Khamenei and his party took over. And the Iranian revolution has really closed Iran to the whole world, and because of that, Iranians might have suffered a lot. They might have, would have been just as rich as the Saudis if the Shah of Iran wouldn't have left. But then again, Saudis always did have a hate for the Iranian regime, and especially the Sunni-Shia divide. And the Sunnis also don't want the Shias to be ruling over or have a very big economy. But what do you think? What do you say? And what about the woman that was shot or that was harassed when she took from which this protest started? She's been made a great hero, And do you really think that if there was not such a strict regime like there is right now, would Iran be more prosperous? Would Iran be more welcoming? Especially Iran is a neighboring country to Pakistan. But we don't usually see people going to Iran for some recreational things. Rather, people go for their pilgrimage. So, what do
But
you
you
think?
know, the same exact culture is inside Saudi Arabia too. But Saudis are good friends with all the Europeans, and they have been with the US. So it's not a matter of culture. It's a matter. The thing that what happened was that the Khomeini government, when they came and toppled this Shah Pahlavi, they actually vowed that they are going to throw out the British oil companies and the British interest from the country. So before Saudi Arabia got their oil, Iran was already pumping out oil, and it was a big supplier of oil. And the British oil company was taking out all that oil. And that is what Khomeini did, which angered the British. And later on, they have never cooperated with the West, and they have made this religious thing. And this religious thing, some people are really very motivated. Even in Pakistan, people say that, yeah, this is the right type of revolution. If you bring a religious revolution like that, I mean, our problems would maybe end, because, we are getting so far away from religion every day. So, but the thing, why the Saudis, dread the Iranian and especially the Iranian revolution, is that Iranian revolution did not stop in Iran. It was exported into Iraq. And Saddam was actually afraid of this revolution. When the Iran-Iraq war started, the real reason was that there were almost 20 to 30% Shia population inside Iraq, and there was a leader of those Shias, and he had aligned with Khomeini, and they were talking about, there was this thing that the revolution is going to come into Iraq now. And then you see that after Iraq, Syria also had this Bashar al-Assad, the Shia dynasty, who has been ruling over this majority Sunni state. And then you see that there is a Houthi dynasty inside Yemen, which is Shia. So that's what they were afraid of. The Sunni states of the Arab states were afraid of being encircled, because they were seeing that this Khomeini revolution thing is so strong, and people are so with energy coming into it, because these people were with this, why this whole revolution came. And everybody's just in one day, all the women started wearing those abayas and covering themselves up, because they were with this revolution with heart, because they thought that this was revival of Islam, So that's the real thing, that is the real Sunni Shia divide, which is actually that the Saudis are afraid that this revolution might one day come into their land also, because every country has some Shia population, right? So that's the thing.
Saddam also attacked Kuwait, which was not a Shia. Saddam was...
there was a reason for that.
What was the reason for attacking Kuwait?
Just when the Iraq-Iran war had ended. After that, the US had continuously instigated Saddam to fight this war with Iran. And they had given him weapons, and they had given him the WMDs to use in the Iran-Iraq war. They were with him. But the day this war ended, they started putting sanctions on Saddam and on Iraq, and they said that you have WMDs and you are going to kill, and you have killed those 100 people, you have killed those and now matlab you have to give this WMDs back to us, or whatever sanctions itne zyada, there were so much sanctions that there was food shortage, there was no construction material in Iraq, there was no medicine coming in, so there was that oil for food deal that Saddam made, because there was no food in Iraq. So the next thing they did was, these sanctions went on for something like 10 years or something, and then they made Kuwait do this slant drilling into the oil wells of Iraq and take the oil out. और उसी में there was something also like that कि the OPEC countries, they put the oil prices down, and the oil started getting out also. Or Iran was like just from all sides it was like being cornered. It couldn't sell its Saddam couldn't sell. First thing, he couldn't sell his oil. Second thing, his oil is being theft now. And third thing, that he is going to sell whatever oil he can sell on a lower price now. So that's the reasons why they attacked it. He attacked Kuwait.
Sanctions are a way to cripple a country and economy, and for suffering.
And it's another long story. We will do it another time. So it was a really nice podcast today, and really nice talking to you.
Thank you for coming to our podcast. Such an amazing time we had. Very beautiful topics that we discussed, and hope to see you again. Any last words?
Right. Yes, good wishes for everybody, for the humanity, and keeping fingers crossed that we don't have a US-China war anytime soon.
It's great that you guys have been listening to us. Have a great day. Have a great night wherever you are. We're signing off. Do you want to?
Allah Hafiz.
Allah Hafiz.